Morning, friends. I hope and trust all of you are doing well. You know, in the relationships, often we have failed expectations. So as I look back at my broken marriage that began in high school and ended 4 years later, I see some places where I wish I had made different decisions. This air castle thinking, if you've never heard that phrase before, air castle means like castles in the sand. It's an imaginary home in which you'll never live. It's a castle in the sky. You can't live there because it doesn't exist. You live in an imaginary world. And that was what we did when I met my first wife. You know, a lot of my understanding about marriage, my theoretical understanding of marriage was gained from Hollywood movies. And that's not the right place to get it. But you look at these movies and, you know, everybody lives happily ever after. Everything just seems to be going just fine. The man will, when they get married, the man reads poetry to the wife. The wife feeds the man grapes. You never see anything about dirty dishes or sickness and suffering. That's just not part of the Hollywood picture. And I had imbibed that. And my thinking consisted of air castle thinking. It's just imaginary. It never was true. And so we always hoped that as we pursued these imaginary goals, we'd find happiness and peace. I can remember like New Year's Eves. And that's coming up, you know, before too many more weeks. On New Year's Eve, we'd go to some party, some function, some get-together. And as they count down the clock, you know, usually we're drinking. So by the time midnight arrives, everybody's drunk. We're drinking, getting ready to celebrate the new year. The new year comes in, and everybody, you know, they do what they do at midnight. And then you wind up at home early the next morning, and it's just deflated. There's a hangover the next day, and the whole thing just had lost its thrill. My dear friends, there never was any thrill there. But my air castle thinking, I always thought that as we pursued these things, we'd find some real joy and peace. And all we found was a hangover and a disappointment. So that was part of the detrimental effect on being trained for marriage by Hollywood movies. The poetry and the grapes, you know, there is some romantic excitement in the marriage union. I'm not trying to say it's all dirty dishes and shiny shoes. You know, there is some romantic times in the marriage. But a lot of it, you know, you get up in the morning, you get dressed, you have breakfast, you go off to work. There are dishes to be washed, there are clothes to be washed, clothes to be hung out, houses to be cleaned, oil to be changed. There are a lot of these mundane, regular chores that come with the marriage package, and I delight in them. You know, I have found great joy and delight in going out and weeding in the garden. My wife and I do it together. My happiness and my peace comes being with my wife, whatever we're doing. If we're cooking together, if we're washing dishes together, it's a delight because I'm with her. It's not based on a hope of what I'm going to receive. I have it. I have my wife. I have a relationship. I have the truth. And the great difference between the way I thought then and the way I think now, you know, is biblical thinking. In the Bible, you have an objective truth. That means you see a subject in the Bible, whether it's the husband-wife relationship, how to treat your children, how to relate to the people around you, your friends, the administrative work in the workplace, music, dress, diet, association, recreation, all of these hundreds of topics. You have in the Bible an objective standard. The Bible says, seventh commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. Then Matthew 5:28, to the man that just looks upon a woman to lust after her, he's already committed adultery in his heart. So it's more than just the touch, it's the thought, it's the intent, it's the motive. The law is far more than just surface. It's deeper than skin deep. And didn't have that back then. You know, if you'd asked me back then what's right and wrong, I couldn't have told you, didn't know. I would have said it's all relative. My wife would have said the same thing. It's just we had no objective standard. You watch a TV news show, you always get the pro and the con. Whatever the subject is, they argue the pro and the con. They call that balanced reporting. You get both sides of the issue. But in the Bible, it just says adultery's wrong, period. That's cut and dried. So instead of relativistic thinking, it's all relative. It doesn't really, there is no right and there is no wrong. Instead of this relativism in the Bible, you got a bedrock truth. This is the gospel truth. And that is very helpful when you're trying to live a life with your spouse and plan for the present and for the future. And back then, we had no boundaries because we didn't understand the concept of a sacred circle. The house band, the husband, the keeper, the protector, the high priest of the home. It's a sacred circle. And inside that circle, there's a no trespassing sign up. Nobody comes into that circle but the husband and the wife. Now, what keeps it sacred is the presence of God. So you've got the husband, you've got the wife, you've got the Lord to guard it, and you have, in your life, because of biblical teachings, you have boundaries, you have certain restrictions, you have certain places you just don't go. And that provides a security, that provides stability, that provides permanence that you can't have in a secular relationship. So always on the verge of divorce, always thinking about, well, if I don't get what I want, I can find somebody that will give it to me. And so it's never any kind of solidarity in the home because you don't have a sacred circle. Now inside that circle, the husband and wife can pray for each other. They can ask God to help them resolve their problems or conflicts. But if you have no sacred circle, if you have no boundaries, if there are no restrictions, if you have no prayer, how can you resolve the challenges that most certainly will arise? Whether it's a secular marriage or a Christian home, you always have challenges. Now, in a Christian home, as problems come, it drives the husband and wife together. But in a secular setting, as trouble brews, as the problems come, it can have a tendency to drive the husband and wife apart. And that's a huge difference between a secular relationship and a spiritual relationship. But my girlfriend in high school, we didn't know any of these things. Just hadn't read the Bible. Completely ignorant when it came to these things regarding the serious impact of the marriage vows. Because when we said, until death do you part, I don't think I really meant it. I didn't really understand what I was saying. Richer or poor, I didn't really understand what I was saying. These traditional wedding vows, which are beautiful, it's a huge commitment. Didn't understand the commitment. Just thought about getting married and having a Hollywood marriage, and my dear friends, it all crumbled. So failed expectations. It always is a blessing to have true expectations. And with God, you can have that. I expect to have a happy home because when the Lord is invited in, He brings happiness with Him. John 13:15. I've given you an example that you should do as I have done. Now, verse 17, if you know these things, happy are ye if you do it. We didn't know those things. We couldn't find happiness. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. My wife and I, it's hard to rejoice at a football game or a beer joint because you rejoice in the Lord, not in Budweiser or the Georgia Bulldogs getting a touchdown. It's a completely different world. And Proverbs 17:22, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. My dear friends, we need medicine in our homes. We need the balm of Gilead. We need a great physician. And when Christ comes in, He has a medicine to make merry the soul. But without Him, it's all just bitterness and sorrow. So thank God for these beautiful principles that have power to change the heart and change the home. And may the Lord bless you today. If you're struggling in a marriage, if you just struggle with your marriage, struggle with a relationship, the Lord can help you. And He helped me. My first marriage ended after 4 years in bitter divorce. My second marriage started out the same way as my first marriage ended, in bitterness. And Darlene and I were married for 10 years, and it was not pleasant. It was not a good marriage. It was not a secure home. We had the same kind of mindsets that we had brought with us out of high school. But after 10 years, our lives, we had some crises in our lives, and it drove me to God and His Bible. And as my wife and I began to read the Bible, our marriage began to change. You can have the same experience. If you're struggling in your home and in your marriage, if you bring the Bible in, it brings with it the truth. And the truth, if you know the truth, will set you free. It begins in the home. The family relationship, certainly, children are part of the family relationship. But before you have children, if you're a man, you have a wife. If you're a wife, you have a husband. Before the children, it's the man-woman relationship. And when these two, Genesis 2:24, become one flesh, this is the beginning of the home. It is God's purpose in His design that our home be a little heaven on the earth. So when you come home, it's just like you walked into heaven. Dear friends, may the good Lord bless you, your heart, and your home, and keep you. Have a nice day.